You're listening to Find the Good News, Episode 25, The Secret Sauce, featuring John O'Donnell. This episode of Find the Good News is sponsored by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. Check out our work at parkerbrandup.com. Would you like to help make sure I'm asking my guests the really good questions? Just visit findthegood.news and click the questions tab. I'll see if I can get your question dropped in the fishbowl. Each episode, my guests will dive deep, select 3 random questions, and if yours is selected, I'll ask it on the show. That's findthegood.news. When I started Find the Good News, I couldn't have predicted the effect it would have on me. Each and every guest has left an impact. This is the absolute truth. I think about each one of them in some small way each day. John O'Donnell, the man I visit with in episode 25, doesn't break that stride. In fact, John's eagerness to serve and willingness to lead has only motivated me to continue seeking out good people in this community and beyond, bringing their personal stories to you. Whether it's impacting our region through his day-to-day job as director of the Southwest Louisiana Area Health Education Center, or the myriad of ways he puts his passions to work in our communities on a grassroots level, John is motivating people to be more active, to live healthier lives, and to get involved in small ways that make a big difference. John is knowledgeable about what he's talking about, and he has to be. When you're making changes, you're often making waves, and those who rock the boat should be able to back up their reason for doing it. What I loved about John is that he doesn't beat around the bush when it comes to making changes, things that need to happen right now, and he presents these issues, as well as the possible solutions, in an infectious way that makes you want to start making them right away. My perception is that with each venture into good works, John O'Donnell is consciously learning, taking note of what worked and what didn't, and then adjusting his thinking and tactics to ensure that the next go-round is more successful. He's working a long plan that will enhance the quality of life in Southwest Louisiana on many dimensions, but at the same time, he's making sure there are small and visible victories along the way to help us all stay motivated to keep working toward a broader vision. He'll make you think twice about what you're cooking and eating, where you're shopping, the businesses you support, the laws you're voting for, the way we're planning and building, as well as the way we're all getting around from place to place. It's good news for all of us when there are people like John O'Donnell in the community. Not only are they good people, but they're stepping into leadership roles and teaching the next generation of leaders by their example.
Wake up, it's morning. You're dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep on the path to your deliverance, and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you just want to shut it all down and get no news at all. With Find the Good News, I aim to change that by focusing on good people doing good work. I visit with artists, educators, civic and spiritual leaders, musicians, business owners, students, volunteers, and everyday citizens who are using their creativity, resources, and talents to bring hope and happiness to their corner of the world. In each episode, I dig into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have street-level conversations about relatable things going on in their lives, discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that are anchoring them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of news in the world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm going to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
I listen to you online, everybody who comes on here, I wouldn't say everybody I know, I just kind of know of. Mm-hmm. And the whole show's kind of been built around recommendations.
Awesome.
From one person to the other, which is really kind of cool. That's what I was hoping would happen. Because, I've got sort of my own little blast zone of people that I have in my orbit. But what I think's beautiful is when you just start seeing everybody connecting. And what's really cool about this show is everybody who's come on has given me just this pile of names. But it's neat how the same names keep coming up from different people that I wouldn't think
That's cool.
are connected, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And so for you, what happened was my buddy Dan Smith.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Dan Smith.
Yeah. He loves you too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to know.
He and I started going on these sort of like Sunday, every other week we'd go get together on Sunday. We're old friends from way back. I mean,
cool.
I met Dan when I was like 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
So during high school, he was as close to me as a brother as I'm ever going to have, you know?
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah.
Dan's like that too. Like Dan's family, like real fast. You know?
Oh yeah. He's an intense guy and in a good way for me. I mean, I love him. My newer friends, I guess, in my life feel like they know him because I've just talked about him so much. I guess because he was around for so many formative years, you know, all that high school time, you know, it was just close.
Yeah.
But we were visiting and I was telling him I was kicking around this idea of this show, you know. I said, I think I need something like that in my life.
Yeah.
And I think locally it wouldn't hurt for us to have something like that out there too. And so we were kind of milling around about it in our conversation. And I hadn't even cut the first episode, and he texted me, and he goes, "Hey, I know who you need to talk to, my buddy John O'Donnell." And I was like, "Well, I don't know him." And so I went online, and I was like, "Okay, I mean, I saw your pictures, but I didn't know anything about you, you know?" And I probably still don't, so that's what I'm going to find out today.
Yeah, we'll find out today.
Yeah. So this is what I wrote down, and I just don't even know where to start with you, man.
Yeah, neither do I sometimes.
I don't know, because, you know, this was what I asked Dan. I said, so what does he do? And that's kind of the question most people, it's like, so what do you do?
Yeah.
And when I started kind of doing my own little investigation, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, he's involved in so many aspects of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I'm just going to jump right into, because it was the first conversation that I kind of chimed in on, was litter. You made a post about those overflowing trash cans in Lake Charles the other day, and I was like, you know, this is an old problem.
Yeah.
And so just from that one post, I get the sense that you kind of have a particular way of looking at society.
Yeah.
And so you can see these things and you go like, hey, these are things we need to pay attention to. How can we solve this?
Yeah. I've got this like incredible, I've always had this incredible passion for service. And also for our community and serving our community. And so anything and everything that involves helping out or just pitching in, like, I'm there.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, through that process, I've kind of identified things that I'm more passionate about and things that really matter, things that are kind of those silver bullets that if we fix those things, then, you know, it's just a waterfall of good things that happen after.
Yeah, right.
And litter prevention is one of those things. You know, it's a lot of people think of litter as just unsightly, but it's also a drainage issue. It's also, you know, I'm very passionate about the ecology of our area, and it's an issue for our waterways. I mean, we've got so much trash in our waterways.
Sure.
Poisoning our fish and birds, and I mean, it's disgusting. It's not like anything I've seen elsewhere in the country. It's more akin to what I see when we visit like the third world.
Interesting that you said that. I had a guest on here last night, and we were talking after the show, and I brought up a story that a local gentleman shared with me who curates a museum, and he said, Tom,
I have a meeting with Tom this afternoon.
Oh, great. Well, Tom's one of my favorite people.
I love him, man.
And he shared a story about, and I can't remember where, and he's going to have to forgive me for telling this, but what I was told by him was that he gets a lot of visitors from other countries who comes through in the museum, and some people had stopped by and they had been around seeing the area, and people told them they should go by the museum. And the thing that she was most surprised by was the amount of poor that we had in our area. And Tom said he was that was quizzical for him. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she was like, well, there's just a lot of poor. You know, you can see the poor.
Yeah.
And what she ultimately meant was, it looks to her like everyone's poor because we don't take care of our streets. We're not taking care of the litter and the trash.
Well, and she's also, from an economic standpoint, she's not wrong. And, you know, I talked a minute ago about those silver bullets. Poverty is one of those things. We are the poorest state in the nation. 18% of all people in Louisiana, 18% are on food stamps.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we have more in common with Honduras than we do with Delaware.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so I mean, like whenever people visit from other countries, I mean, they're literally seeing poverty. And I think you're right. I think that's apparent in our road conditions and in the litter and just in our development practices.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, living in Sulphur, and, you know, again, I don't know a lot about the inner workings of the city, but living in Sulphur, I would say like the Grove, for instance, that little area right there where Tom's at, and that little corner is sort of a nice spot.
Right.
But for many, many years, I mean, at least the last decade, I've always said there's a moat between the interstate and that nice spot.
Right.
Because to get off, there's no curb appeal. It's not clean. The roads are in complete disrepair. You wouldn't know that there was a reason to get off. The reason, you just keep driving.
Exactly.
You know, so that's some stuff that for me, just aesthetically, I get why people maybe don't pull off. They're like, hey, let's go on to the next area, something that looks safer.
Right. And, you know, we put and we'll get into this, I'm sure, in a little bit about what I do for my day job. We put a lot of emphasis on designing walkable communities. And walkable communities are also like what you're talking about. They're aesthetic. They look good. Yeah. And that has this ripple effect that's incredible. When people come and visit those towns, they spend money, which is a sales tax that then can fix the roads.
Sure.
You know, they come in and they're exercising, which has a chronic disease impact. Whenever you walk more, you have less heart disease, less cancer, which has a tremendous economic impact on the healthcare costs of the area. I mean, it really is another one of those silver bullets. Just designing aesthetic, walkable communities can solve so many problems.
Interesting, man. Walking's a big issue for me because I actually got hit by a car.
Right.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was because I was getting up every morning. I loved going on a sunrise walk. We live out in Carlos. Now, granted, I mean, it's out in the country. So, I had this sort of, I guess, false sense of security that it was safe out there, you know, and I'm just on one of my morning walks one morning and wham, you know, and I was walking on the side of the road, which, I mean, I see people do all the time. But I tell you now, I go walk every morning when I get to work. There's just a sidewalk here in town, right here. And I'll go for like a 20-minute walk. Now, when I hear just that sound of a vehicle, I'm this is just not conducive. This is
that
really
anxiety. And
man.
Yeah.
And when we were in Colorado a couple of years ago, we were on a dog sled ride, and I was talking to the guy who ran the little dog sled operation. And I said, so what's the real industry up here? Because down here you hear what's the industry all the time. And he looked at me with this puzzled look. He was like, what do you mean, the industry? I said, well, like, what is it that people are thriving on up here? And he looked at me and he kind of got this smile on his face, and he turned around, looked 360 degrees, and he said, well, this is the industry, the environment, where you're at. We really care about that a lot up here because, this is how we all live. We want to live here. We want it to be clean. We want you to have that experience. He said, that is the industry. And I was like, wow, that's a totally 180 view of back home.
And we have those resources. You know, I mean, we're the sportsman's paradise for a reason. We have these incredible ecological resources. And one of my pipe dreams is to create, diversify our economy by creating what I'm calling a cultural economy, which is, arts, music, and a big emphasis on the outdoors and selling the outdoors as a community asset that we have to get people to come visit us and spend money. Yeah.
My son asked me that the other day. He said, so is our state the sportsman's paradise, or is our area the sportsman's paradise? I said, well, that slogan is very good, and we work in tourism a lot too.
Sure.
And so that is a part of it, is trying to sell the outdoors. But I don't know if it's, I guess from our perspective in marketing, I don't know that it's ever sold properly. It's sold as, I hate to say it, I'm just gonna be blunt, come in here, enjoy it, take a dump, and then leave. It's kind of the attitude that I have felt for years. Well,
I was in Hammond this week for work, and just talking with some people I went and had dinner and sat at the bar because I was dining alone, just talking to people from Hammond, which was fascinating. Hammond is a really cool town, and I love the people there. And we had a really real conversation about, are we still the sportsman's paradise? Is that an outdated slogan? Because before, when they came up with that, like, we did have a big hunting and fishing industry. We did put a lot of emphasis on our ecological resources, and now, like, we don't.
I wonder about that too, because I remember as a kid hearing that. I mean, I've never been a big hunter, but I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I love hiking and camping, and I kind of realized it the other day. My family and I, we were, it was Sunday and the weather was just beautiful. It was last weekend, actually. And we sat around for like 2 hours scratching our heads. Like, what do we want to get out and just enjoy this. So what do we need to do?
Yeah.
So we decided to drive the Cruel Nature Trail, and then just go sit at the Gulf Coast. But I was like, really, I don't know. In our minds, we felt like it's a short list, of actually accessible things that don't require a lot of effort to get to,
right?
Where you can really just enjoy the environment.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just our perception.
So I think this is a good transition to start talking about like what my job is.
Yeah, right on. Okay.
Yeah. So I am the director of the community health department at a nonprofit public health foundation called SWALAHEC, or the Southwest Louisiana Area Health Education Center, which is a huge mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
So my job in the community health department is my staff and I prevent chronic disease. Heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, cancer, those are all chronic diseases. And what we found is that they're largely caused by the environment in which people live. So people are obese, not because they are lazy or because, they want to eat fast food, but because fast food is what's available and they don't have the resources, like you were mentioning, to just walk safely outside. They know they need exercise. They know they need to walk to school or walk to the store. The city or the community that they live in is not designed that way.
Right.
So what we do is we provide technical assistance, resources, grant opportunities to communities to help them coalition build, get partners to the table, and then ultimately develop themselves into communities that don't give people disease.
Okay.
Right. So walkable communities that have easy access to healthy fruits and vegetables. And like we were just talking about, easy access to the outdoors and green space is like one of the biggest things that we can do to prevent all these diseases.
So then if that is what y'all do, you have some challenges in Southwest Louisiana.
We're the worst of the worst. So this is the front line of the front line. I mean, Louisiana has the worst health outcomes of any state in the nation. We've got the highest rates of obesity, the highest rates of heart disease. Heart disease kills more Louisianians than anything else ever. And so, I mean, we're on the front lines of, and we're understaffed, we're underpaid. Like, we don't have the resources that we need to be fighting the biggest fight. But we're doing it in a way. Well, I like to tell my staff and the people that I pitch my job to that we're fighting a guerrilla war against chronic disease.
Gotcha.
Right. So we are doing these incredibly innovative tactics. We're building coalitions throughout the state. We work a lot with Louisiana Cancer Prevention.
Okay.
One of my main roles is I'm also the network manager for all of the Louisiana Healthy Communities coalitions throughout the state.
Okay.
So we're building these diverse coalitions in each region of the state. There are 9 public health regions. And we're trying to bring partners to the table that are outside of the healthcare realm. So like people that have a stake in what we're trying to do, like quality of life, economic alliances, as well as those healthcare partners to the table, pool their resources, public and private, to try and get this done.
Gotcha.
It's an out of the box concept when we're talking about public health and fighting disease. And if we can pull it off and we can prove that it works here, then it's something that we can apply everywhere. Because, in Louisiana, we're kind of the canary in the coal mine. We're sick, we're poor, and we're on the front line of a changing climate and a rising ocean. And these are problems that the entire country is going to start looking at in 20 to 25 years. So if we can find solutions to those now here, where we're already having the problems, then we can have a real shot at changing things nationally.
Yeah. So you said something that I think is interesting. You used the word guerrilla war, and I want to hear, as much as you can share with me, because I think maybe there might be a lot of people that don't even realize the things that y'all have already accomplished.
Oh, yeah.
So give me some examples of things that you've done in the guerrilla war. Like what have you...
So we know that we tried to stray away from programmatic efforts. We were very focused on programming before we started thinking about this in a different way, which it was like, okay, let's start a walking group, or let's start a group that gets women, exercising, and we pay for personal trainers for them. And we realized we were spending a tremendous amount of resources and money to help 20 people at a time.
Yeah.
So we started to think about what can we do that's going to impact thousands of people in one stroke with the little resources that we have.
Okay.
Right? Like a guerrilla war.
Yeah.
And we hit on policy, systems, and environmental change.
Okay.
So policy, one of the big wins that we've had was recently in Lake Charles and in a bunch of communities throughout the state, where it's called Complete Streets. And a Complete Streets policy changes the way that a city or a municipality, it can be, the state also has a Complete Streets policy now. We're working in several parishes. they have to consider all modes of transportation in every transportation infrastructure redesign that they do.
Okay.
So say they're gonna what's the name of the street out here? Is this,
Maplewood.
Okay, so say they're gonna restripe or redeck Maplewood.
Okay.
When they do that, they have to consider. They don't have to include, but they have to consider bicycle and pedestrian transportation, public transportation, as well as cars and freight.
Gotcha.
And that's had tremendous impact. And we've got bike lanes in Lake Charles
Right.
now. There are all these bike paths in Baton Rouge now after they pass theirs. New Orleans looks like a completely different city.
I see. Okay.
With all their bike and ped. And as a result, obesity rates are dropping.
Gotcha.
Very quickly. Because
Yeah.
people, it's now safer to ride your bike to school or to walk to work.
Yeah.
And that changes. It's not just an immediate impact. It's something that the city then has to think about every time they do any transportation infrastructure redesign.
Yeah.
And that has long lasting impacts.
So how are y'all involved in making that happen? I mean, what is...
So, what a lot of people don't, a lot of policymakers and elected officials are unfamiliar with what that policy is, how it
I've
works.
never heard of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we provide the technical assistance to explain to them what it is. Then we tell them, why they need it, and convince them that they need it. We use our coalition strength, all those diverse partners, to advocate to these policymakers and elected officials and say, this is something that we want. And then we provide the technical assistance to show them, okay, this is how you would pass this policy. This is how you would incorporate it into your code of ordinances. Because a lot of times, you can pass a policy, put it on the books, but unless you're integrating it into the existing code of ordinances, it doesn't mean anything.
I gotcha.
So
Okay.
we help them and walk them through that process.
So y'all have a lot of research to do. And
Oh, yeah.
you have to know a lot of things in a lot of different categories.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm actually blown away by just that alone.
That's just one of the like that's a tiny fraction of the policy stuff.
So what's another one that we can, because see, that one I can see, that one the public can hear and go, oh, I've seen those bike lanes.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that comes from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And they may just go, hey, we have bike lanes.
Hey, bike
now.
lanes are great. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You don't really think about all the
Right.
work that went into making that happen.
Which is fine. Like, if
Sure.
you want to look at a bike lane and not have any idea how it got there, great. Like, I just want you on the bike lane.
Yeah, right.
And I want you noticing that they're there, because a lot of the people, like, I see a lot of, it's a new concept,
Sure.
and we want to get people to not drive in the bike lanes.
Right,
And increasing their awareness of, this is what a bike lane is, this is how it works, and this is why you shouldn't drive in it.
Yeah. How does that work? I mean, do y'all have in your awareness arm? I mean, is there an education factor that you'll have where you're
Definitely.
teaching people like, hey, we have bike lanes now and here's how people use them?
Absolutely. It's definitely it's probably the weakest. I'm going to be real with you, but it's probably the weakest arm that we have, because everything that we do is data driven, right? So we look at the data and we try to figure out what are the interventions that we can do that are going to make the biggest impact.
Gotcha.
And we know that education is low on that list.
Gotcha.
Typically, when you create an environmental change, like you put in a bike lane, you change the built environment. Mm-hmm. People educate themselves.
Yeah.
They figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so that's where we kind of count on that. But we do a lot of social media stuff. We work with partners like Bike Law Louisiana, the Quality of Life of Southwest Louisiana, to create, awareness campaigns, flyers, social media campaigns. We do a lot of media, like I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
We're on KPLC a lot, just trying to educate
Sure.
not just motorists about how to not drive in the bike lane, but also cyclists. To this is how you should ride on the road safely. Ride with traffic. You're a part of traffic. Ride with, walk against, all that stuff.
Yeah. So all that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we were just having that conversation here this morning that really change is just generational, and sometimes we don't live to see it.
Yeah.
The real, lasting change that just really gets integrated.
Yeah.
But and that's probably going to be that way with a lot of what y'all are doing. You're going to see it, the real result 20 years from now.
Yeah. And we accept that. We understand that a lot of what we're doing is going to be generational change, and societal change is hard and
Sure.
all that. But on the other hand, we don't have a generation of time left for a lot of these problems. We have to solve them now, and we have to come up with fast solutions. So, and that's a question of resources.
Sure.
And we're working on it. I mean, we're doing good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have to show people that it's worth doing. I mean, I think about that quite a bit. My wife and I were talking about just single-use plastic. It's a big issue.
Yeah.
And I was even reading an article today about contact lenses. I was like, incredible. I had no clue. Yeah. You just take them out, they get old, they throw them away, and you don't think about where it's going.
Right. I mean, single use everything.
Oh,
think about how many times you unwrap a item of food and then
we experimented the other night. We went to the store, and I said, okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten pretty good about bringing our own bags. So we've kind of solved if you have them with you and if it's convenient. And most of the time we have them. But But so I said, I'm going to try to shop using containers that are either biodegradable or don't have single use, right? Plastic wrappers and things. Very difficult at a standard grocery store, like a Kroger or something. Yeah. And so I got home and I started going through everything. I was like, okay, I think maybe 20 to possibly 30% of what I bought was compostable, possibly. Yeah. But the rest of it had some, even if the container was like a cardboard or chipboard, there was still like the little foil tops and little tiny wrappers that you don't even think about the inside of a box.
And then the question becomes, even if you could recycle that, do we have the resources locally to do it? And we don't.
I've told this story before on this show, and I'm going to tell it to you. I think it's a funny story. One of my friends loves it. But when I was probably 20, 22 years old, I lived here on Maplewood Drive down at the end, and where Pete Menina Road is, that kind of cut back to 210. That was sort of no man's land back there. Okay. And so there wasn't a lot of traffic. Right. It was almost like the secret way to get to Lake Charles. Okay. So I would go walk there in the mornings, and one morning when I was walking there, I just started to look around and I saw all these like bottles and cans of just garbage. Because it was hidden, people were just throwing trash back there, couches, refrigerators. And so I thought, I think maybe if I really work hard, I can clean this up. And so I'd drive my car over there every morning, and I would just shovel gloves, and I'd dig up all the glass bottles. And man, there were like old glass bottles going back to the 60s. People have been dumping out there for a long time. Yeah. I got home after a week of doing this, and I had just my whole driveway full of glass. Oh, man. But I mean, I'm this young guy. I'm thinking I'm making a difference. Maybe my neighbors will see, somebody will volunteer to help. I had this idea that if somebody sees it, they'll want to pitch in. So I cleaned all these bottles out, and Sulphur had a recycling program at that time. Oh, okay. And so I had got the information, and I set all those bottles out in my front yard. I was like, well, it's that day. Yeah. They pick up glass, and I had them on like, bins and stuff. Right. So I'm sitting out on my front porch, patting myself on the back, man. I have my coffee, and I hear the truck coming. I'm like, this is going to feel so good to have done this, you know? Small, but... Right. So I'm sitting there, and the guy comes around the corner with the big truck, and he waves at me, and he smiles, and he takes my bins, and he dumps the bottles out, and he throws the bins in the truck and drives off. And I went and asked him, I see him doing it all down the street, and I said, oh, guys, my neighbor said, what's going on? And said, oh, they're canceled the recycling program in town. And so I had all these glass bottles. I mean, dude, a lot. Yeah. And I was kind of this weird, almost ironic moment where I was like, I have nowhere to take these. Right. So what am I going to do with them? Right. I mean, it was a lot. Yeah. And I had to throw them away. Yeah. So it was like that moment for me was really crushing. I was like, it just jabbed in my head that we don't have a system in place for this.
And that's why, we mentioned litter at the beginning of the show, and that's not something that I work on professionally, but it's something that I'm very passionate about. Yeah. And I think that for a long time, we've put this emphasis on this idea in everybody's head that we have so much litter because we've got lazy people that throw stuff out of the windows of the car. Yeah. Well, in researching the problem and looking at best practices of communities that are successfully combating litter and because I do a lot of this research because I have no hobbies and I'm a dork. Like we were talking about with the walkable communities, it's an environmental change. It's not that people are throwing things out of the window. It's that the dumpster policies or the policies about how many trash cans you have to have or, how you enclose your trash cans at a business or a municipality are poorly enforced, poorly written, and or just don't exist. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff is like a lot of the trash is coming out of the dump trucks. I talked to some guys at State DOTD who were trying to tell me how much taxpayer money they spend at DOTD just to clean up litter that is coming out of dump trucks.
I believe it.
And, even dumpsters, so the wind blows and you don't have your dumpster secured properly and the trash gets blown out of there. Or if you don't have your dumpster secured in a fence and someone's going through your dumpster and they're pulling out, because we have seen a rise in homelessness lately. Yeah. There are a lot of people that are digging through dumpsters and they're just throwing the stuff out. Sure. And then the wind picks up.
Survival mode. I mean, yeah, and that's the last thing on their mind is picking up what they've tore up.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we can if we can solve that through policy and just create, spend some of this money that we're spending on education, because like I mentioned, from a data-driven perspective, education does very little, and spend that on environmental and policy change, then we can really put a dent in this litter problem.
Yeah, you said something in that post that I thought was very very powerful, and it was maybe missed by some. I don't know, but you said, we're spending money on media buys and things like that. And I'll tell you that's really jabbed me, not in a bad way, but in a good way, because many, many years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I worked for one of the companies that was producing the media for the Calcasieu Parish litter campaign.
Right.
And so in doing that, we had to kind of drive around and find litter to shoot and come up with a way to make this catchy and all that kind of stuff, the fun litter campaign, you know. But in doing that, I was shocked. Like, just exactly what you're saying. We ended up going by Walmart here in town. I'd never really went back in the back of a Walmart or on the side of a Walmart. And, we had this, the woods kind of right by there. When we drove back there, blew my mind. Right. And what I guess I discovered from that is that it was almost like years of whatever had fallen out of buggies. Yep. People's stuff like receipts. I mean, you name it. I mean, anything and everything. And what had happened all these years, it had just kind of, the wind would roll it across the parking lot and accumulate back there. And John, it was...
Yeah, it's gross.
Massive. I mean, I was like, you'd need like an army of people to get back here with mini dumpsters just to pick this up. So it was kind of, it disturbed me. Yeah. And I did have that feeling as we were working on that. I was like, we're not going to change this with this commercial. Right. This isn't going to, we're going to show people this. Right. But it's just that's not going to do it.
And it's not this, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't be putting out litter prevention.
No, I get you're right.
But what I do want to do, and this is something that I've talked about for like a year now, is we don't currently have a way to grade litter by a geographic area. So we need to create a system where we can look at an area geographically, figure out how much litter is there, and then look at a way to categorize that litter so that we can isolate the source. Yeah. Then we use those media buys to target where they're actually coming from. Because just saying like, oh, don't throw trash out of the window of your truck. Right. You've got to target those buys. Yeah. And we've got to target our litter prevention and cleanup efforts where it's going to make the most difference. And if we don't know where those are because we don't have a grading system, then how do we know?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it when I drive home. Sometimes I say, if it wasn't for the correctional facilities having people out cleaning the roads, I can only imagine what it looks like. Because I mean, there's not any other effort out there that I can see.
Right. And I mean, those guys they do a tremendous job. I think the sheriff's department does a lot of, they pick up a lot of trash.
Oh yeah.
But there's so much trash that there's no way that's going to, like, that alone in a commercial about throwing Wendy's out of your truck is going to make a difference.
No, I mean, and when it rains, it's really revealed.
Right.
I mean, that's when you see it.
And it rains, that washes into our bayous, then it gets into the storm drains, it gets into the pipes, it creates drainage problems, and then ultimately it washes up on our I-10 beach. Because that wind blows, and that's why I-10 beach collects all that trash and looks so bad.
And I'm happy, I know it.
You've probably heard me mention filming videos, building websites, creating logos, or building brands on this podcast. Well, there's a good reason for that. I'm a brand builder, and my brand is Parker Brand Creative Services. My team and I have built countless brands in the Gulf Coast region, and a lot of our work in the travel and tourism industry is experienced across the country and honestly the whole world. We have our specialties: web, logo, package, and whole brand design, as well as video production and photography. But the reality is, we function as a full-service advertising agency to businesses that don't really mesh well with larger advertising agencies or just don't want to have in-house creative departments. But don't listen to what I say. Just go to our website, parkerbrandup.com, and take a look at what we do. We're a show it, don't say it team. Okay, you should definitely say it too, but you know what I mean. That's parkerbrandup.com. We think sideways, we push forward, and we'll get your brand up.
So take this, you've earned it, a melody in chorus.
So we talk a lot about lakefront development. Well, we need to work on respecting the lakefront that we have.
Sure.
And then develop it into some. Otherwise, we're just going to build a bunch of nice stuff in a dump.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So how do you change people's minds? I mean, because that's a big part of this, right? I mean, changing people's minds and changing their habits. I mean,
and like I said, that all stems from environmental change. Yeah. So if we create ways to prevent litter from coming out of trash cans and dump trucks, then enforce those policies that prevent that from coming out of there, and just provide people ways to put trash away.
Yeah.
Right. And, create more robust recycling programs, more robust recycling policies, give people an option to reuse waste.
Yeah.
That's really going to help. So creating that environment in which people they don't have to litter, or they can't litter. That's how you change people's mind.
Do you think some of it is just luxury that maybe creates the apathy about these types of things?
Oh yeah. I mean, like ultimately the problem here, isn't policy and all that stuff. It's overconsumption.
Sure.
Right. And that's a luxury.
Sure.
And as we see the rise of the middle class in the developing world, that overconsumption is going to start happening everywhere. And that has huge global problems when we're talking about, ocean health. And I mean, because really, like, the overconsumption problem here is an economic issue, right? Like, we can afford to buy single-use plastics. We can afford to buy these things because we are a developed country. And that's just going to get worse globally unless we figure out how to change it here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I wonder about this because I've got this feeling and it may just be for myself, that I have to change it in me first, because I used to have a bad habit of looking out at the world and saying, oh, that's bad. Somebody should do something about that. And then I had to come back and go, well, maybe that somebody's me. But then the next layer to that was looking at myself in the mirror and saying, well, actually, I've got all this stuff all this is in me. I'm the culprit,
right?
So how do I change it? I guess my question for you, and this is more about you than maybe who you work for.
Sure.
At what point does that happen for you? Draw a line for me to John O'Donnell today. Like, when does this first start becoming like important to you? People, the environment, the community.
Yeah.
Did something happen, or was it just like a gradual leaning in that direction?
It's always been there.
Yeah?
Ever since I was a kid.
Okay.
I've always had this passion for service and for helping others. And, I've always been involved in service organizations and scouts and all that. And
so you were a scout?
I was a scout. Yeah.
Right on, man.
Yeah. I was Troop 107 at OLQH.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. We were allowed. We actually just did a service opportunity at the old Catholic cemetery on Common Street.
Yeah, I saw some photos of that.
Yeah, we cleaned it up for Matt Young made this amazing walking history tour.
I didn't get to go, but that's awesome.
Oh my God, it was so cool. And I mean, Matt just did such a great job with it. I'm so proud of him for that. But we cleaned the cemetery up for that, and my old Boy Scout troop came out, and I tell you what, they are so much better behaved than we were when I was there.
That's actually really cool. I've always felt that way too, that the Scouts had a really can really embed a code into a person.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are just anchor points to how you can go out and engage with the world through
My
the Scouts.
godson is very involved in Scouts right now, and I've seen the change in him and seen the mindset change of thinking about himself, because this younger generation is the me generation, right? Like very, very focused on like what they can get and all this.
Sure.
And his involvement in Scouts, I've seen the mindset change of he's starting to think about his community, and he's starting to think about global health, and he's starting to think about all these things. And it's so cool to watch that happen as a result of scouting.
I've always been fascinated by that. I mean, I'd say this show even comes out of that. I've always been curious about what makes a person change. And for me, it's always been when I begin to see the other. You use that word, and the other is very important, and as important as myself. And that for me was a big change, because I was able to stop going looking at things when they got to my front door,
right?
And start looking at them before that point. How am I impacting other people in the world, by my behaviors and my habits?
So I guess you mentioned a turning point. Service was always a big part of my life, Scouts, and then I spent a lot of time doing mission work in Central and South America. Did you? I did, yeah. And then Hurricane Rita happened. And I realized that a lot of the efforts that I was putting in to help out internationally needed to be here. Before that, I saw myself as maybe just even moving down to Honduras or Guatemala, and
just staying in service,
and staying in service where I felt it was needed. And then Rita happened, and I realized, I came home and things were so bad, and I noticed a lot of the parallels between the communities that we were working in Central and South America and what we needed here after that storm. And so got involved at Magnice, enrolled at Magnice, and got involved in the student government. That was that first semester after the storm was my first semester, where they weren't sure if they were going to open or not.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and a lot of the classrooms we were in didn't have desks. We were all just sitting on the floor, and so got involved in student government there, and just started to try to make things better. And ultimately founded a recycling program.
Really?
At McNeese, the first recycling program at McNeese, and we would recycle everything at campus and then take it over to Team Green.
Yeah.
And within a year, we were the largest student organization on campus. And we recycled more. We won this. It's like the Super Bowl of campus recycling called Recyclemania. We recycled more than any other college campus in the country.
Really? Right here in Southwest Louisiana.
Second place was the United States Coast Guard Academy.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
No, I never heard that. I'm sure there was some publicity, but I never heard about it.
It's something that like it haunts me to this day, because when I left McNeese, it kind of died. And
really?
I didn't build in that sustainability into the program that should have been there. And I put a lot of that on myself, and it's something that I put in my resolutions for 2019 is to kind of go and identify some leadership at McNeese and empower them and try to help them with whatever resources they need to get that back up and running so we can start talking about some environmental responsibility.
That's interesting, man. That happens with so many things. Any good program. I've seen it in my lifetime where things, you have a dynamic person with a vision that comes in, and then there's a lot of activity, and you think, hey, this is good and it's going to stick around, and then once that transition takes place, there's no
that was a big lesson for me. I mean, I was depressed about it for a long time, but I think I'm better as a leader for it, because now when I like we'll use Lake Area Runners for an example. I took over. I was the president of Lake Area Runners, which is a 40-year-old nonprofit in Lake Charles. I mean, just a very storied and huge part of the city, but it had fallen into decline. There were the board. Dan was actually like one of the few remaining board members, Dan Smith. And he called me up. I was not on the board at the time, but he called me up, he and Charles Mackinac, and asked if I wanted to go have a margarita at Cancun. And they tricked me into becoming president at Lake Area Runners. And so we built the brand back up, built the club back up. And then I realized like this is not a sustainable thing for me. Like I cannot keep putting in the amount of work that I need to this and still live my life. And so what we did is we recruited this stellar, just amazing board of leaders and empowering those leaders and trying to create that sustainability into the thing. And I was able to step away and hand it over. We've got just the most amazing president now, who's so much better than I ever was, Teresa Ernst.
Okay.
Yeah, and she is just a powerhouse. I mean, is doing so many great things for the community through the sport of running.
Yeah, it seems like it's thriving. I mean, the running culture in Lake Charles and just Southwest Louisiana in general has changed.
It's changed for sure, and that's a direct result of Teresa's leadership and that awesome board. And that's my big accomplishment at Lake Area Runners, was building that team and trying to get them, recruited and empowered, and that came from that lesson from McNeese of like, we've got to build sustainability into the good things that we want to keep going.
You said something. I'm going to jump back, and I want to, if you'll talk about it a little bit. You said you did mission work, and foreign mission work. Yeah. I don't know, just in listening to everything that you've said so far, that almost seems like that possibly was that was maybe where a big driver comes from for you. Yeah. You came home, you brought all that home with you. Right. I've heard soldiers say this quite often too, who come back into the world, right? Yeah. Once they've seen what they've seen, they look at this totally different. Yeah. Coming back.
It changes you.
Yeah, it changes you. You go, okay, I've seen another side of life. Yeah. I've seen how other people live. I've seen problems that we may face eventually, or are already facing, that we're not tackling, or we're pretending aren't there. Right. And so it's almost like a new set of glasses. Yeah. Do you feel like that was kind of what happened?
I think you hit the nail on the head there too, when you said like the problems that we pretend aren't happening.
Right.
All these problems in Honduras and in Guatemala and Haiti, they're here. We just kind of sweep them under the rug. Yeah. And that's. They don't. I mean, it's on the surface. You can see it, and going down there and seeing that and saying, and then coming back and just going back and forth. You kind of take the blinders off when you get home. And you recognize that there's a lot of stuff here that has a similar feel. Yeah, especially in Louisiana.
Yeah, so I get you. I've always had that kind of feeling, and sometimes you said depression. I mean, I've really depressed myself with going too far in that direction, because you can look around and just almost see nothing but the problems. Really, just that's all it looks like, and that does happen to me still. I mean, I struggle with it. I mean, especially when I see it, and I get that sense that probably a lot of people do. That, well, what can I do? Yeah, what can I do? So they look out into the world and they see leaders like you doing something. and they just don't know where to start. Like,
Yeah.
what should I do?
Right.
You know, and for me, it's always been just finding one little thing to begin with.
Find the good news.
Yeah, something. I mean, like, there's got to be something I can change. Whether it's just shopping differently or taking a walk.
Yeah.
Just, if you don't do anything,
Right.
that for me just leaves me in the hole.
I have the same problem. You know, I'm very critical of myself, and that's something that I probably should work on. I'm very hard on myself. I expect a lot of me, and as a result, I overextend myself and get involved in a lot of problem solving in the community. I mean, I have that same problem where I'm involved in so much, and everything is so bad that you get so bogged down, and you're just like, what do we do?
Sure.
You know? And the way that I found to combat that and to kind of solve that depression is just focus on the work.
Yeah. Okay.
Focus on what's in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, pick one, like you just said, pick one small task, focus on that. When you finish that, pick another one. Solve one problem at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and instead of getting overwhelmed, because a lot of this, it's so multifaceted, you know, it's the problems are just so ridiculous. But if you just solve one problem at a time, that's how you move forward, and just grind it out.
Yeah. I've discovered that in a whole nother way is with another type of poverty is really the poverty of just listening to people.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the things, I guess, for me that I've been able to do, because it's something I can do.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't huge, but it's huge collectively.
Yeah.
But it's huge to whoever's in front of you. And I was guilty of seeing the problems, or if somebody came to me with a strife and they were hurting or something.
Sure.
And I would go, yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, and try to show them some tenderness or kindness. Then they start cracking that open, and you realize this is like huge. Just within this one person, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of really big problems.
Right.
And I can't do anything about it. So for a while, what would happen is when I began to sense that, I would go, I can't go here because it's too much.
Right.
Because I would think once I get in here, just like you said, I'm going to want to help them with this, and then this and this, and then you become, your own life disappears in the process, and the people that you have to take care of suffer. So it was a weird place I was in for a while, and it just reminds me of what you just described, because see, what I've seen in our community a lot is someone like you and other people like you. They go, hey, you're dynamic, you're involved, you're educated, you're connected, and you're willing.
Right.
So people are gonna reach out to you constantly, because what to me that does just illustrates that we do need more people. Stepping into those roles, just like with the Lake Area Runners. You know, you need more people.
I think that's something that definitely it defines my style of leadership. Is that yes, I'm dynamic, I'm involved, and I'm ready and willing, and that often leads to me overextending myself. But I also put in a tremendous emphasis on empowering other leadership. And especially empowering leadership in our youth. We've got to get these kids involved in their community and get them excited about helping out and pitching in, because that's what A, creates generational change, and B, gets kids to stay here in Lake Charles or maybe they go away to college and then they come back, which I think is the secret sauce. Is these people that go away and then they come back.
Yeah, well, you said it even with yourself. I mean, you went away, something happens, you come back.
Right. But we've got to empower other people, because when you put all that stress on just a few dynamic leaders, it's not a sustainable way to move forward. And this is a call out. I mean, if there are other leaders that are listening to this, or you find yourself in that position, just Google it. Just Google how to empower leadership. And work on, getting those people around you to also kind of buy into that vision and pitch in. And it's going to take a lot of the stress off of your shoulders, and it's going to create a sustainable model for change.
It's interesting. Everything you just said reminds me of a book I read like 20 years ago called A Higher Standard of Leadership. And it was using the Gandhian model. It wasn't by Gandhi, but it was some people who had analyzed his leadership style. And a lot of what you just said falls right into that. It's got to be built on the younger generation. You have to empower them, and you have to show them where they can serve, because people will show up to help. But you have to give them the opportunity to do it. And they need to know. I find that in looking at my own children, and especially my son, I see that desire. He doesn't know what to do yet, but but he has that feeling and that sense. And I go, if you don't let the system of just fitting into the world and just kind of going about your business till your grave subdue you,
right,
you can really get out there and use that and serve people.
And that's, I see that a lot in kids where they do have that passion, but they're still lost about it.
Sure.
And that's our role as leaders and as brothers and as godsons or godfathers and fathers and grandfathers, is to help those kids find that path to service.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's through scouting, sometimes it's through church, sometimes it's whatever, but putting that emphasis on service. And a lot of times that means we've got to serve ourselves, like show them, like this is the example.
Yeah.
And I don't see enough of that. And that's another call to action that I want to put out on the show is like, get involved and show your kids what service is.
Yeah.
Because that's going to help them find that path.
I think you're right. I'm guilty of that. Just as guilty as anybody else of internalizing and having lots of good thoughts about things, but not actually letting them manifest into a thing.
Right.
And as I've gotten older, I regret not, but now I finally, I guess, and it is my children who inspire me to do it, to go, hey, this is something that we should talk about, and then find a way we can serve too, because that's going to change it for him.
Yeah.
My father and mother weren't big community activists or anything, but I do remember them serving people and caring about people who needed help. And they were always willing to extend a hand to someone. So, those are one-on-one basis stories like that, but just in a broader sense of changing their area. Yeah. But you're right, though. And again, a conversation I had last night on this show was that you're on the front line here. It's a kaleidoscope of problems.
Yeah,
that we're facing.
It's the worst of the worst.
What do you? And I wrote this down just in looking at everything you were involved in and the places I've seen you kind of pop up. I was like, okay, you've already said that you're out there pretty far. Yeah. So drawing that back in, what are some of the things that you think are just critical in our area, that if these, and again, I don't know what that number is, 3 things, 5 things, that you go, hey, if these things begin to change, we're going to see the kind of change that needs to take place, the difference.
Oh, man.
And that's a hard question. I was like, as I wrote it, I was like, well, where would I even start with that? Pick one.
I think that we definitely need to start having a realistic conversation about urban sprawl.
Okay.
I think we're overbuilding. And we know this from other communities, like our sister city down the road, Lafayette, where when we overbuild as a result of growth and we build out instead of up, then we build infrastructure that once that bubble pops, once we lose these construction jobs, and we will lose the construction jobs, don't let anybody tell you different.
Right.
All that infrastructure that we've built to accommodate them, we've got to pay to maintain it with our tax base. And we won't have the tax base. So what does that mean? Our taxes are going to go up, and that's going to kill us. That's going to hurt the community so hard. We're already overtaxed. You look at any of the bond measures that try to get passed for something as cool as a hurricane music.
Right. People don't want it.
Immediately get shut down. Yeah. No more taxes. We don't want to raise taxes because we've got the highest sales tax in the nation.
Yeah.
So we've got to stop. We've got to take a hard look at responsible land use. We've got to take a hard look at urban sprawl. We've got to take a look at how we want to design our city to be sustainable for the future.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the problems in our community development throughout the region, not just in Lake Charles or Sulphur, has been that people are looking 5 years down the road. They're looking 10 years down the road. They're not looking 30 to 50 years down the road.
Right.
And a lot of the problems that we see now are happening because of decisions that were made 30 years ago. We've got to retrofit our communities to be better instead of being able to build it to be better. And we've got to solve problems that were created a long time ago before we can create solutions to the ones that already exist.
Yeah, not even new ones. You're talking about this is big. That's a big issue just as a creature. Okay. We don't, you look at Native American philosophy or the way they lived. The whole 9 generation idea that you don't do anything that's going to hurt 9 generations down the road.
Right.
That's not the way we think.
No.
At all. It's very in the moment, immediate. I see it. I look around even just where I live. I live out in Carlos. And just in the last couple of years, the things that changed that really hurt my heart are dead properties.
Right.
Like
blight.
Sure, like example, and it's small, but it's the kind of thinking that really disturbs me, and I would love to see change. Is there was just a corner lot that had some beautiful oak trees on there, and it had been there since I was a kid. But these big old growth oak trees, within months, those are cut down, gone.
Right.
Concrete's poured, and a Circle K that was on one side of the street is now on the other side of the street, and there's just a dead gray piece of property. It's just real estate to be consumed.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's no consideration for leaving green space. It's just like, hey, this is empty. Let's plow it down. What can we put here?
And that could all be solved with one simple policy about responsible land use that dictates that they have to consider that green space.
Yeah.
But and that's a call that I want to put out there to these policymakers and elected officials that might be listening here, is that you're gonna have to make some tough decisions, and decisions that are not popular.
Sure.
But they're the right ones for future generations.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to do that. That's what you've been elected to do. That's what leadership is. Bold leadership is making the decisions that are unpopular, but that need to happen anyway.
And so why aren't they? I mean, it's really, why are they afraid? I mean, what's the answer? I mean,
because they want to get reelected.
Right.
So I think if we had more politicians that put more of an emphasis on leading and on governing, and less on what's going to happen in the next election cycle, and staying, sustainably in their position, we'd be better off as a community.
I think you're right. I mean, because we live in a sort of look over here, don't look over here influx of information, you know, and so it's easy to get distracted about things that really don't matter when there's some serious things going on. Like, sort of, somebody said this on a podcast the other day, and I loved it. He said, it's like a moss that's just in a box, and you just kind of close the box, and then you don't ever look over there. And then you open it up a year later, and the thing is just sprawled and grown all over. That's how things like this are happening. It's just
and we've got this chronic disease issue. We spend more money on healthcare than anything else. I mean, if we could get some of that money back into our economy, we'd be so much better off. And a lot of that stems from the fact that you got to drive everywhere.
Sure.
If we're designing our community, and that's why I put a lot of emphasis on downtowns, on local business, on building a core around your city, that Main Street model that our grandparents used to have. People will walk, just a simple walk from the parking lot to the restaurant, or from the bus to the restaurant, or whatever, has tremendous impact when we're talking about cancer and high blood pressure and heart disease.
Sure.
We could save so many lives just by designing our city differently. That's just one of the things that happens when we start talking about responsible land use in a way that reins in that sprawl.
Yeah, I do fear that, though, for our area. I mean, I see it just everywhere. I mean, even articles that are out there. One that came out a couple of years ago was sort of like a warning article out of the Katy area in Houston. They were like, just a warning to any of these areas like Southwest Louisiana that are about to experience these big petrochem booms and construction booms. Be careful. Because now, like you said, the construction jobs have left, and we're left with a lot of flooding, a lot of drainage problems, a lot of the water has nowhere to go. Just that alone is a huge issue. And I was like, man, we're facing almost the identical thing here. It looks like, and it doesn't look like there are any checks and balances in place. So now we're talking about you asked me for 3 to 5 points. So let's talk about bullet point number 2. You hit it on the head. We've got to diversify our economy. We are too dependent on oil, natural gas, and petrochem, and all it takes is a fluctuation in a commodity, or that project gets complete, or it doesn't get greenlit, or whatever, and then the rest of us suffer. And we've got to start talking about creating other avenues. We've got to start looking at tech. We've got to start looking at how do we attract these other industries, without an ITEP exemption, right? Right.
And the way to do that is, this is my model of attracting industry to an area, is build a community that attracts industry. Instead of
quality of life.
Right, exactly. Instead of attracting the industry and then building the community around it, let's build a city that industries want to come to.
I gotcha. Okay.
And so we've got to diversify our economy. We've got to start incentivizing local business over big business. But we know, I mean, there's statistic after statistic that say that local businesses put more money back into the local economy than a Chili's does, or whatever. And we've got to make it easier for people who own a local business to operate. I mean, you own a local business. I'm sure you know.
We face it.
Too well.
It's very difficult.
It's extremely difficult, and it's extremely difficult to start one up. Not everybody can just start up a business, and we see this in especially in like North Lake Charles. I have some of the best lunches in Lake Charles are being served out of people's houses. and it's like an underground restaurant.
Interesting.
But they don't have the resources or the money or the capital or whatever, the legal, to start that as a brick and mortar business.
Right.
But they still want the money. They've recognized the need for the community to have that local business. So we've got to find ways to make it easier for local businesses to operate, incentivize them, give them the tax breaks.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's why that's such a sore spot. I mean, for a lot of people, what was going on with the LNG, that just blew up, and boy, it was just negative.
Right.
And I thought, boy, that's a media storm for them, because it's not. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is true.
Yeah.
That it's harder on the smaller local people to make it.
Right.
Really, and to provide a quality service. It's not that the skill isn't there, the talent isn't there.
Yeah.
But you just don't get those breaks.
And I came out very publicly against that ITEP exemption.
Yeah.
And I caught a lot of flack for it.
Did you?
I did. And maybe rightfully so. But I don't think, I definitely recognize that this is a part of our economy, and we've got to keep it. We've got to foster it. We've got to keep it there. Otherwise, we can't just diversify our economy away from it. We've got to.
Right. You can't just cold turkey pull a band. Right.
We've got to nurture it. But I don't think there's any excuse for any of these industries to be getting 100% tax exemption for anything.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of getting immediate sales tax increase at the detriment of getting a long-term, tax benefit.
Yeah, and I mean, there's people who they're going to say it just doesn't serve them. They're not going. That's going to cause a lot of people to be really upset.
And I'm not against an ITEP exemption, right? Like I think that we do need to incentivize these businesses to come here and stay here, even though we've got the infrastructure to incentivize them anyway. But I don't think that anybody should get, and the governor's office has already mandated you can no longer give 100% exemption. It's capped at 80, but even 80 is
still quite high.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, no, I don't know what would make a difference though to help to encourage small businesses and people to try new ideas.
Right. Well, there are these things called opportunity zones. Where you can create, like little geographic zones. You pass an ordinance and it says like, this is an opportunity zone for local business. So we want you to build your local business here. We're going to provide you with resources to do it. You're going to get tax breaks. You're going to get.
I see.
Yeah, and we've also got our seed center in Lake Charles.
Right.
The seed center could be an incredible anchor. We've just got to utilize it more.
Sure.
We've got to put it out there in the community. We've got to empower the seed center and give them more resources so that they can be that incubator. And
really kick it hard.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've got to build more business incubators. We need a business incubator in North Lake Charles. We need a business incubator in Sulphur. We need to be able to incentivize businesses in these places that need local business.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that is we as consumers need to support the local businesses that are already here, because that sends a powerful message to other people that are thinking about starting a local business, or maybe even regionally, that want to bring their business to us. Business can do well here.
Yeah.
These other guys are doing well here because we, as the people, the consumers, are spending our money locally.
Sure.
We're going to the Villa. We're not going to Chili's. We're going to Pops and Rockets instead of
right.
Robbins.
It's interesting because think about what you hear though. I'm laughing because I think about what I hear in the past here when someone goes, we're getting a Chili's,
right,
or we're getting a whatever brand,
right.
And I think that there's something about that validates your worth, almost. That a big brand wants to be here, so we're making it. We're
right.
Okay. And I don't. What you're describing is the opposite. Really, we're not. Because for instance, like when I brought up going to Colorado, I didn't see any. Where we were at, there wasn't a single big brand.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. Where in Colorado were you?
Winter Park.
Okay, cool.
The whole Estes.
Yeah.
I mean, in Estes Park too. I went there too, but there was big brands in Estes. But Winter Park was, I guess, a little more isolated.
Right.
And it was all local restaurants, and I loved it because it's like you would ask, you'd go to a local jewelry shop, and you go, hey, where's a great place to eat? And they would recommend it, and it would be another local place. And it was just local hopping.
Yeah.
The whole thing, all local.
I was in Leadville, Colorado in August. Which is up there kind of by Breckenridge and all that. And it's the highest incorporated town in America.
Wow.
And they were traditionally a mining town. And this was in the early 80s, I want to say. They were this mining town with it, like their entire economy was based on these mines. And overnight, the mines closed. They had the highest unemployment rate in the nation.
Wow.
Overnight. And what they did, this guy who I actually got to sit down with and talk to, and is just this incredible like cowboy. He said, I'm going to save the town. And like, he was just a miner, right? Like never ran for local office, never did anything. He was like, I'm going to save the town, and I'm going to do it by using what we've already got here, the mountains. So we created this incredible race series called the Leadville. It's the Leadville Race Series, and it's like a mountain bike racing, trail running. Using the natural resources to get people to come there. And then they also built these incentives to build local businesses and empower local businesses, and then passed ordinances saying that you cannot start a business unless it's local.
Oh wow!
And so now they have this incredible Main Street. They've got all these local businesses, and they have hundreds of thousands of people visit them every year just to come out and spend time in the mountains and spend money in the town and drink their local beers. And it's a town that's like less than 10,000 people.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And it's just this incredible story. We could be a story like that.
Sure.
Like we've got towns here that could do that.
You're right. That's the thing that I find, and especially in doing a show like this, it's waking me up to how many talented and wonderful people there are who really have a lot of passion about changing things and just whatever it is they may be doing, whether they're an artist, a musician, or just someone who's organizing events. I was talking to Charlotte Blake. I mean, a lot of what
Charlotte Blake.
Well, yeah, a lot of what she talked about is very similar. Building neighborhoods,
right?
And things that are going to last, and the sense of community in just a street,
right?
And I thought, that's just so
sense of place.
Yeah, sense of place, a feeling of home.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that feeling, you care more.
Mm-hmm.
When you think it's temporary, if something changes,
right?
In your mind, you're like, well, I mean, and I don't know where that comes from, if it's just a culture of waste, but I was like, well, I'm going to be leaving here anyway.
Right.
It's kind of like what we said about Sportsman's Paradise. Yeah. Come here, utilize our resources, and whatever you do here while you're here, just don't worry about that and take off.
Yeah. And we see that in our kids too, right? Like, okay, I'm just going to go to LSU, and then, after that, I'm moving to New York or whatever.
Yeah.
And
right.
We see this brain drain where we don't have the educated population that we need to do a lot of the things that we're talking about, because these kids are leaving. They don't have this sense of place. They don't have this sense of belonging. We're slowly building that. I had some really cool conversations with some kids that are in law school at Tulane just recently, and they want to come back now because they see these exciting things that are happening. And like you said, there's you see all these people that are involved, and they've got this similar mindset. We've got all this great arts community and everything. I don't know if we've ever had an opportunity like that.
Right.
We talk a lot about this, like, it's an unprecedented time in Southwest Louisiana because we've got this growth because of the industries. I think it's an unprecedented time to be here because we've got this crazy hive mind of progressive, creative people that are moving things forward.
Sure.
And I have trouble explaining that to my friends who have moved out of town that now live in bigger cities. My sister lives in Seattle.
Yeah.
And she visits maybe once or twice a year, and when she comes back, she sees it, and she's like, "What is happening?" And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you. Like, I don't know why these people are coming. And I just hit on it the other day. It's because we're creating that sense of place, and they're coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. When I recently was in an online conversation. I don't get into, I try to avoid those, honestly.
Oh, never read the comments. Yeah.
I try not to, but this one was particular though, because it was like sort of a list of grievances with the area.
Yeah.
And I'm not really saying this to blast the people who made the post.
No.
I thought it was interesting because when I read them, I try to avoid just complaining for the sake of it without a solution.
Yeah.
But this was a list of 20 or so grievances, and when I read them, I went, well, I mean, they're right. They maybe weren't written in a loving way, but I've had thoughts like this, and so I got to thinking about it, and I thought, how does this change though? Do you just again treat this area as a piece of property that's just defunct, the whole area, and just go, well, I'm leaving.
Right.
Or do you change
or just use it as a place to build industry. And this is just where we've got trailers where people work the industry to make plastic for the rest of the nation.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for that. I'm not going to give up on us for that. Like we have been, and we will be so much more than that. And I think, like you said, it's a list of grievances, and they're not all wrong. We got to stop sweeping stuff under the rug. We've got to be honest with ourselves about what is wrong with this community.
Sure.
And we've got to hold our elected officials accountable to those problems and let them know, like, hey, this is something I want solved.
Yeah.
This is the type of community that I want to live in. This is how I want to define our Southwest Louisiana.
Yeah.
Our Southwest Louisiana.
It's interesting, man. I'm kind of smiling over here because
I saw your face light up.
Yeah, something you said, and I can't exactly tell you, but I got this picture. My favorite movie always has been, ever since I saw it, and to this day, is Back to the Future.
Oh yeah.
And
we don't need roads.
Oh man, dude. Yeah. And so you get Back to the Future too, and what I'm thinking about is when they come back in time, and like things are all jacked up. It's like Biff World,
right?
And so I feel like sometimes in life that's kind of what you have in front of you, right? You've got, if we don't do something, we're going to live in Biff's version of 1980, 5 or whatever. Yeah. And but in the movie, I love when you do get to see the differences of how things could be versus how they are, and you get these 3 different views of this one particular place and time. Right. I don't know. I'm just smiling because it makes me think. It gives me like a little bit of hope to think that we don't have to have that. Yeah. And it's just having conversations and then teaching people to do something different, even at that individual level. I know sometimes for me, again, it feels like it's not doing anything, but especially if you have a little impact on your kids, or like you said with scouts, you're around scouts or you're around a group mentoring. That's huge. I mean, I actually wish I'd have had better mentors when I was a kid.
It's not too late. Find a mentor now.
Well, that's true. But when I was a kid, I think back on
Dan, though. Dan's a pretty.
I had good
solid
friends.
mentor. I
did have good friends.
And sometimes that's enough. Like
I was lucky.
I
had moral friends. I mean, moral, still fun people. Sometimes you say moral and people think, oh, that sounds boring. But no, really, I was lucky in the sense that the people I surrounded myself with, or were just lucky, and I surrounded myself, that I happened to be surrounded with, were just good guys.
So now, like, imagine you're a kid like you were without a mentor, right? Imagine your kid's friend is a kid without a mentor, because I'm sure they do have friends. But now, so you as a parent, not only are you empowering your kids, giving them a path to service, showing them what leadership is, and being an example for them, you're teaching your kid to be an example for that kid that doesn't have a mentor. You're creating community around a kid that maybe didn't have it before. That's why it's so important to empower that sustainable leadership and just get that next generation involved.
Totally, man. So. What's the third?
Man. Okay.
We're all over the place, but I mean, it's beautiful.
So number 3, let's start talking about transportation.
Okay.
We've got to start reinvesting in public transportation. That's a model of community development that we had before. Adley Cormier is one of my favorite people in Southwest Louisiana. He's like our resident historian. He knows everything about everything. And some of the most fascinating conversations I have with him are about the old streetcar lines that used to run, and what that meant for the community, and how just that transportation investment grew the community from like a logging community into this diversified economy that had all this cool stuff. And when they ripped up the streetcar lines to make room for roads for cars, that had a tremendous impact on the design of the community and the health of the community and the trajectory that we went on. So if we could reinvest in public transportation, take a few cars off of the road, we could do other things with the road that then do a lot of the other things we were talking about, that build sense of place and build community.
We were doing a project with the Alliance a couple of years ago, and maybe it wasn't even a couple of years ago, but you may have heard of this, but they're talking about creating the different zones, like the SOMAC zone.
The Ryan Street street development.
And I was interested in that because it sounds a lot like what you're talking about, like trying to rethink the way we're traveling along that corridor.
And just to tell your listeners what you're talking about, they were talking about branding sections of Ryan Street as sections of town. So I think it was downtown, midtown, SOMAC, which is south of McNeese. And we have a lot of that, like just that verbiage in our lexicon now. Like we just need to put like, hey, where do you live? Oh, I live downtown. Where do you live? Oh, I live University.
Creating that sense of place, a sense of home, a sense of ownership.
So just build on that.
I love the idea of that. I thought, I can see that, that feeling. And there are things that are happening like that, but in little smaller pockets. I don't think it's maybe as well defined as it can be, but eventually I do see that happening.
So we have got to start talking seriously about disaster resilience. We're on the Gulf Coast. We're on the front line of climate change. We're on the front line of hurricane season. Just because we haven't had a hurricane in 10 years doesn't mean that we're not going to get one. And if we had gotten hit with Harvey the way that we thought we were, I think we would have been in a lot of trouble. We've got to start preparing ourselves for that eventuality. And we've got to start building our city in a way that prepares us for that, and preparing our population for it, and having serious conversations about population migration.
I
mean, people are going to start moving from the south to the north as the ocean rises.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I'm not going to get into why.
No,
climate change is
right.
happening,
But you can look at Miami and see what's happening.
You can look at Cameron.
Right. No, you're right.
Look at this. I mean, we see
Yeah.
it. Like the saltwater intrusion is, I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And we've got to start having serious conversations about that. And we've got to start preparing ourselves for the worst. You know, I tell my wife all the time, like, let's prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. You know, I hope we don't get a hurricane, but if we do get one, I don't want us scrambling around. I don't want to have another Hurricane Rita. You know, I don't want kids that are going into McNeese learning about service by having to rebuild their community.
You just hit what I was thinking, man. That's the way I feel like it has been is we use a disaster to make a change instead of making the change ahead of time. I mean, it happened with Rita. I mean, we saw it in Katrina or whatever. We go, oh, well, the disaster happened. This is an opportunity. Yeah. And that's it's good to use use the opportunity, but don't let that be the big hub for opportunity every single time that these are our big chances, you know?
Like that turning point that turned me onto service. I don't want that to be the turning point for that next generation. Right. You know, I want us to be strong.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's funny, but I thought about this even after 9/11, the same exact thing was, okay, 9/11, terrible tragedy. You see a completely different sensibility about security and law enforcement. Big influx of equipment upgrades and things like that. Well, now you've seen that pour out into the communities with all this excess gear. So you have like almost like a militarization of style society, of the law of society. Yeah. And I said, so this was the big change that came out of that, and then it trickled out. And I'm not so sure that it was because it came from one big tragedy instead of being thought about ahead of time. Yeah. You know, you see things change rapidly and not necessarily for the best. Yeah. Yeah.
But we've got to start taking, because we're not just talking about hurricanes. We can have in the last few years, we can have an afternoon downpour that completely inundates the city.
Right. That blows my mind.
Yeah. And then we've some of the biggest flooding events in the state have just happened like overnight.
Yeah.
You know, and we've got to start preparing for stuff like that.
Sure.
Things that you can't predict.
Yeah.
You know, those 500-year floods are now happening every 5 years.
Right.
Or every 100 years, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got to start preparing for that. Otherwise we're just going to be wet.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, I can tell you just in my own property. I mean, since we lived there 10, 12 years. I mean, I used to, when it would rain like it does now, I didn't go stand outside with a tape measure at the edge of my, slab going, how many inches do I have left?
Right.
I didn't do that 10 years ago. Right. I didn't do it 5 years ago. Yeah. Now I do it on the reg, and so that's a difference, and that's a problem.
My good friend Jared Chandler, who I think is probably one of the coolest and most involved and just powerful people in the city right now. He's a firefighter, but he cares so deeply about our community. He's also the president of the Seven Slot Society, the Jeep Club. Yeah. Every time it rains now, they like assemble at a high ground place with their Jeeps that have snorkels, and they'll go and just rescue motorists.
Wow, man.
That shouldn't have to exist. Right. They shouldn't have to do that. They should be, the Jeep Club's focus should be going out and like going off-roading and stuff on the weekend, right? Like it shouldn't be, disaster preparedness. And so that's, we've got to start doing that.
Oh yeah, it really hit me a few years ago. I was in Lake Charles making a delivery to a client on a regular day, and I was on Common Street, and I called my wife. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be here a little bit because I'm stuck, just because of a rain." Right. Kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, and when you look at the university areas where I used to live before we moved downtown, and every time it would rain, because they're building all these developments south of there, and so it just screwed the drainage all up. And I think they've got it fixed now. I think that Nick Hunter, the mayor in Lake Charles, has done a tremendous job in terms of improving the drainage in the short time that he's been in office. Yeah, which gives me a lot of hope. It's a good step in the right direction. There's progress to be made. But yeah, like that little stretch from Ryan Street on University all the way to Country Club, it's just cars in the median, just because you cannot drive there. And I mean, then that jacks the median up. You drive a big truck into a muddy grass, the median. So then for weeks after that, the street looks like crap. Sure. And then you're impacting sense of place again.
There you go. It's right. And people start having that question. Maybe I should leave. Maybe I should get out of here.
Oh, people do. People definitely leave. Yeah. I mean, people are jumping ship like crazy. Like now, the bridge stuff is happening.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, look, we're in Sulphur. I mean, come on. Yeah. I'd say 90% 90% of what I do is in Lake Charles. I'm having to rethink every meeting.
Yeah.
You know, every single little thing I used to do is not just to hop over the bridge
Right.
anymore. It's an ordeal.
Which I think is kind of cool. I like the idea of people rethinking transportation, rethinking that drive, and maybe using some tech or moving off.
That's
the
what we're
parish
doing.
move their office over here.
Yeah.
But like utilize some of these
Video conferencing and all that. I mean, I don't need I totally agree. We're trying to get, it's hard though.
Yeah.
Just that one challenge, trying to get our collection of clients to hook up for a video call.
Yeah. We live in a really
harder
old
than I thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, like just because I can FaceTime with my dog doesn't mean that I can FaceTime with my boss.
It is interesting. And there's a feeling, I have several that just don't feel right about having, they just don't feel like they're getting the same result. I don't know. I'm not like that, but I do get that. It's an older way of thinking. Even our proofing system, we upgraded about 3 years ago to a fully digital, so we're not driving printed proofs to places. That was a bit of kicking and screaming. So you're right.
Maybe this bridge is an opportunity for people to rethink some things. Like
I hope so. It's again, there you go.
Stuff,
hey, we have a problem. Let's maybe this is again an opportunity. We should have maybe done it before, but we're doing it now. Well, I want to move you into the fishbowl.
Cool. Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've listened to the show, but we have this thing called Fishing for Goodies, and what it is it's full of questions that past guests have left in there.
Oh my gosh.
So I can tell you I've read some of them I have not read, so we do 3.
All right. Can people change is what I just pulled out.
Okay. Really? Can people really change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that they can. I've seen them do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is an easy question.
Yeah, it is.
I kind of want a harder one. But
no, I agree too.
I think they can change. I think that the path to change in people and in communities is different than what we have thought it was. I think that it's a lot more collective than individual, and it spawns from the environment around someone. You know, if you can change where someone is and you can change what's around them, that person's mentality will change, then they will change, and ultimately further that.
I fully believe that, man. I'm with you. I think that, look, you look around the world and that's all you see.
Right.
Big impacts, big change, and it usually means somebody changed, and sometimes it's just little, but sometimes it's...
And it goes back to what I said we focus on at work, and that's policy, systems, and environmental change, because that's how we know we can make those individual interventions that really can save people's lives.
Yeah. Right on, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, can I take another one out?
Answer. Yeah, go for it. You get 3. So.
All right. And I hope somebody left me something. Hope Charlotte left me something hard. All right. Morality, learned, inherited, or both? Ooh. Learned. Yeah. I think that, and it's like that the Lord of the Flies thing, right?
Right on. Yeah.
Like if people left without direction or without leadership, like devolve into a very primal state that is immoral. So I definitely think that you've got to learn morality, and that's again, let's say it again.
Yeah.
It falls on our shoulders as leaders and as fathers and as brothers and sisters to lead that example of morality for the next generation and just be good people.
It's interesting that you brought up Lord of the Flies, because I think about one particular scene, and I've read the book, but in the movie there was a scene that really hit me. I still to this day think about it. It's when at the end, when the soldiers arrive, the little boys begin to cry.
Right.
And it touches me but there's something in that I've always just wondered. I thought, again, it goes back to what you said, morality's learned.
Yeah.
At that moment, what's happening to those boys that they begin to cry?
Yeah.
Is it because they really had learned their morality?
Right.
And was that their morality coming back? Was it just like this, almost like avalanche of that coming back? Like, oh, we shucked our morality, we threw it away, and now it never really was gone. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is there like a part of them that still retained it?
Yeah.
They just had built a hardness around
So
themselves.
you're saying maybe it is inherited, and it's just we just lose it if we don't have that right direction.
I wonder. I'm not saying you're wrong. I do think that it's inherited. I think it's learned, but I do. I always wonder if there isn't. Part of me believes that we have something.
Yeah.
Something in us, and I don't know what it is, but there's like a center that isn't all trashed up.
Yeah.
Original pristine place.
Let me spin this back and ask you a question. Do you think that in that, like, okay, so if morality is inherited and like everybody's got a good place, are there people that inherently have a bad place?
I wonder about that too.
Is that, I mean, because I think we've all seen evil in the world, right?
Yeah.
You know, are those people, did they learn that evil?
Yeah, did they learn it? Right.
Yeah.
Or did it come from somewhere?
Right.
That's a good question. That's actually really interesting, because I have somebody I listen to, and I like what they said. They can prove one thing, they can prove that something else is going to happen, because they said they have to believe it because it's happened once already.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying, when something just arises and it's inherently evil or painful or destructive, and it's sort of like a original destructive force. I mean, if we can say that there's something good, there's some kind of counterbalance to that.
I always ask myself, like, what led that person to that?
Yeah.
You know, was it, I mean,
was it just tragedy or structure or their life, or was there the bad seed?
Yeah. You know, and my colleagues in mental health will tell you that it's a lot of it is childhood trauma.
I can believe that. Sure.
But I don't know, you know.
Well, there are stories. I mean, you'll hear unapologetic. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, man. That's something to really think about.
Yeah. I would listen to a podcast this week when I drive a lot. I work statewide, so I'm in the car a lot. And I listened to a podcast, the Rich Roll podcast. Okay. And he had, I forget the guest's name, but they were talking about addiction this week. And that, you know, this guest his opinion is that a lot of addiction is not genetic, it's not environmental, but it's things that have happened to you. You know, these people are addicted to heroin, or they're addicted to food, or they're addicted to alcohol. You know, they're addicted to whatever because something happened to them in when they were children. They've got repressed something. You know, like not all addiction, but a lot of addiction is trauma based. I thought it was an interesting,
and that's nurture right there. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mix, I would say. And for my answer, I would say there's some kind of mixed bag. I think definitely nurture and learning is definitely a part of it, because you can, you know, some of my favorite stories are, I used to read comics when I was a kid, but I always loved these Elseworld stories where you take the story of Superman, but his rocket crashes in
Russia.
Yeah, Russia
Superman,
or something.
Red Sun.
Yeah, Red Sun,
one of my favorite comics of all time.
Exactly. Well, there you go. That's exactly that point right there. It's like, oh, well, what happens when someone's nurtured completely different?
Yeah, that's why I love that comic too. Yeah, and I love it. Just for everybody listening, you should definitely pick it up. It's on an app called Hoopla, where you can rent digitally comics, books, movies, anything that the Calcasieu Parish Library has. Big fan of the library system. Like, push the library, use your libraries. You can rent pots and pans at the library. Like,
I don't think people really know that.
They don't, and that's why I want to, like, every chance that I get to, like, blast that out, like, use your libraries, please. But they've got this app called Hoopla. Get Superman Red Sun, because it's not just what happens to Superman, it's what Wonder Woman becomes. It's what Batman becomes.
His impact on everybody.
And Batman becomes this, like, underground freedom fighter that's fighting communism. It is fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting how relevant that story is to what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, how, you know, you change or become different, and what does that do to your circle of influence?
And what happened, you know, that one event, Superman just landing there, impacted all that DC universe. And how did that work? You know, that ripple effect.
Yeah. What happens when a symbol of hope that did exist is taken out of play and becomes a symbol of, boy, that's interesting, man.
That ripple effect is why everybody should think about everything that they do and say. You know, just you know, keep that in mind.
Oh man, we talked about two of my favorite things, man: comic books and Back to the Future. I didn't think that we were going to get to talk about that.
We got one more question,
man. Yeah.
I don't know, like, what the time frame that you were looking at.
I mean, I really wish it goes where it goes. We've been kind of fluent with that. Open. With
Has your project, passion, or work changed you?
Yeah, well, that's a good one for you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that in a number of different ways that we could sit here for 2 hours about, and it could be its own podcast. I think the biggest way that my job has changed me is that I am now a stronger systemic leader. Right?
Okay.
And I think that I am a more adaptive leader as a result. Like, in public health, you get punched in the mouth a lot.
Really?
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's because public health in Louisiana is tough. You know,
well, it's probably not popular.
It's not.
I mean,
and that's why, like, you know, it's a lot of the times when we brand ourselves, like, public health is kind of like the fine print.
Well, dude, I mean, think about it. You tell people, hey, if we need to make this change, and they say, hey, that change affects my bottom line, right?
But we've also, you know, in public health, things have not gotten better in 40 years in Louisiana. They've only gotten worse. So having to think about problems in a way that marshals resources differently, that uses resources differently, that makes meeting structures more efficient. This just having to adapt and create different systems around how you lead is definitely probably the biggest change that my work has had on me. And that's a direct shout out to one of my colleagues in New Orleans, Mac Giancola. He's the Louisiana Comprehensive Cancer Controller for the state.
Okay.
He works with me on the Louisiana Healthy Communities Coalition's project. And just one of the smartest guys around. I mean, just this genius. And he's getting a PhD right now, and a lot of what his focus on is this emerging field of adaptive and systemic leadership. So I'm getting a lot of knowledge about that from him, and it's really, really changing the way that I see things and do things and lead.
And you saying those words, just adaptive and systemic, because two of those two things initially don't seem like they go together.
No.
The word adaptive and then systemic.
Right.
Adaptive sounds like fluid and open and kind of flexible, and systemic sounds very structured or rigid.
I think it's that we've got a lot of people that are natural leaders, right? Now you can pick them out in a community, any community, right? But being able to be a leader that can stand up, get punched in the mouth, change your tactics, and still win, that's somebody that you want, and that is something that I'm really, really learning a lot about right now.
I like that.
So, I
like that.
Adaptive leadership.
Man, that's wonderful. I actually hadn't considered it from that perspective. I like that idea of a leader that's willing to stand up, get punched in the mouth, and then change tactics.
Yeah, or not, or just take the punch.
Yeah, sometimes does that happen to you? You just take the punch and
Absolutely.
say, hey, and
that goes back to something we were talking about earlier, is that sometimes you've got to make the tough calls, but it's the right one for the community. And that's what ultimately, that's what a leader should be, and you should be strong enough to do that. And that's an empowerment to all the leaders that are listening to this. Just be strong, get punched in the mouth, just take it. You can take it.
I have to ask you this, man.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any aspirations politically?
I hadn't until recently.
Yeah. What sparked that?
I think just a conversation that I had with my godson, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. And it was kind of, we were talking about the Avengers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And we were talking about Captain America: Civil War, where
one of my favorite films.
Yeah, I love it. And one of my favorite. I mean, Civil War, the comic arc is incredible as well. And for those listening, there's two sides of Civil War. Captain America thinks that the Avengers should be autonomous and they should be able to solve the problems that they want to solve and go to the events that they can impact. And Iron Man wants them to sign this superhero registration act where the UN then tells them where to go or whatever.
They become an agent of the government, basically.
Exactly. And Captain America's argument against that is that governments have agendas, so you have to go where the government agenda is. And I always thought I was on Team Cap. I always thought that was where the Avengers should be autonomous or whatever. But then I'm talking to my godson, and we're talking about why do governments have agendas? Mm-hmm. Why are there leaders in government that have these agendas that are adherent to special interest, that aren't representing the majority of people? They're representing small groups of people that have a lot of influence. Mm-hmm. And it's because the right people don't step up to the plate. Right? Captain America could be one of those guys.
I see what you're saying.
But he's content to not be, because he's not stepping up to the plate, and therefore nothing changes.
Right, I get what you're saying.
Right.
Changing something from the inside, is infinitely more effective than just kind of attacking it from the outside.
Exactly.
I guess. So
and I don't want to be that guy.
No, I get that. Man.
I don't want to be that guy that's too afraid to step up to the plate and change things from the inside.
Well, sure, John. I mean, the system is in place. Right. That's not going to completely fall apart.
Right.
I mean, it'd be one thing if that were the case, if everything were just chaos and the system didn't work, and then you had these sort of outliers out there ready and waiting, willing to serve. Right. But that's not the case.
And the other side of this coin is that I think that, and I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm not that guy. But there are areas of Southwest Louisiana and regions and elected positions where I think that we are underserved, and we could be better served and better led.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of these guys that's going to step up and run for the first seat that opens up. I want to go where I'm going to make the most difference.
Sure.
I think that there are a lot of elected officials out there that are just like, okay, I'm going to run for this now. I'm going to run for this now, and then they
stepping stones to different positions.
That's their it's a career for them. I don't want to be that. I want to know that I can make an impact here. This is how I'm going to do it. Let's put some strategic planning into it to figure out how that's going to work. Then let's run for it. So it's not something that's happening tomorrow. But yeah, I would, to answer your question, yes, I think I do have some political aspirations.
Well, if you ever ever do decide to, and you find that position that's right for you, I think you're going to bring a lot to it.
Thank you, man.
I mean, you've just got a diversity of experience and knowledge, and then the passion, and honestly, just the awareness that you seem to have about yourself to say, hey, I want to be a better leader.
Yeah.
And I know I need to be. And here's some different ways I can learn to do that. I mean, some people fall into leadership. Right. You know, and falling's not always a great way to do things.
And if you do fall into leadership, you've got to be conscious that you've always got to make yourself better. That's like, as you know, that adaptive model or whatever, it should be an evolution of that model too. Like, you should always be pushing yourself to be better, learning new things, learning how to better serve, learning how to just be a better man, be a better woman, you know, be a better person. That's like, you've got to keep evolving. That's what it's all about, man. You know,
I love that.
You can't get complacent and like, okay, you know, I've got this, so I'm good.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's a lot that
you can always be better.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I believe one of the things I keep taped on my wall, and I've carried it from job to job that I've had, is change is the law. It's easy to say change is the law when bad things happen, because you can kind of just blow it off. But for me, when I read that, I believe it's force, and it's a good force. Change is something you can work with, you know, and you can insert yourself into. Change is happening inside of you. It's happening out in the world, and you can be a part of that. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. I love to read Thich Nhat Hanh's work. You know, he was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and he was very young when the Vietnam War was, you know, hot and heavy. And, you know, he lived in exile almost his whole life. But his master had told him that. He said, you know, change is a good thing. Yeah. And the reason he said that is because eventually this war, because change is the law, this war will end. You can insert yourself into the process of change and help that come about sooner. Right. You know, bad things do happen, but you can be a part of what's next. Yeah. You know?
And change is part of democracy, right? That's why we have election cycles. And when I studied democracy in Greece when I was 16, and the original model was that, like, you know, it's just a rotating community group, right? Like, you didn't get elected, like, oh, it's your turn to serve, like, get up there. And that created change, and that's what the strength of the system was. Yeah. That's why we have elections. And if we aren't voting people out, if we aren't changing that leadership and things stay the same, we don't get that change, and I think that we're weaker for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, thank you so much for taking the time to come over. I know you're very busy, but I mean, it's been a treat for me to finally get to meet you.
Any excuse for me to come and visit Sulphur, I'm going to do it. I love Sulphur,
yeah. Well, and then you get to go see Tom again today too.
I do. I have a meeting with Tom this afternoon.
What are you guys talking about, man?
Brimstone Museum.
Right on, man.
Yeah. Just trying to, like, what can we do to make that place better? Because it's such a cool place.
Oh, it is.
If you guys haven't visited the Brimstone Museum, go check it out.
It really is a treasure. We're lucky to have that, and honestly, I feel like we're lucky to have Tom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, Tom has made that place what it is, and just such a badass.
Yeah, I feel blessed. I mean, he and I, when he came on the show, we've been personal friends for quite a while, but we don't get to see each other very much because we're both kind of busy. And, you know, I told him, I said, it is really a shame we're a minute and 45 seconds from each other, and it takes we have to make a special date to, you know, to do it. But he's working hard. He's trying to do some good things over there.
He's doing some good things.
Yeah. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This has been a blast.
No, dude, we'll shoot this far and wide, so hopefully somebody will hear something that'll really, I
hope so. I hope we empower some people to be better.
I do too, man. I mean, you have some good messages. I think that especially young people, but shockingly, I'm surprised there are a lot more high school age kids listening to this show.
Oh, cool.
You know? Yeah, that really shocked me.
Yeah, I love that.
I've been hearing that, and I thought, wow, these are younger, 16, 17-year-olds. And I think what I'm understanding is that they are enjoying hearing adults have these conversations.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, hey, kids, if you're listening, go off to college, get a degree somewhere else, and then bring that secret sauce back. Learn some stuff from another community, and then bring it back to Lake Charles. But come home.
And I love you just